Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerer's Guild. Today on Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 2, we are going to be talking about how to prepare for your afterlife depending on what your intentions are after death. Okay, so this is the first video in this series that is going to be focusing on necromancy, and I decided to start it off with a group essay asking exactly that question. What are your intentions for after you die, and what steps have you taken for that process? And we will get to the essay here in a bit, but beforehand I have a few stories that I want to tell you. One about a good friend of mine, and one about the time that I died as a child. And then we will discuss a bit about how to prepare for your afterlife and the moment of death, as well as what you can do during life to make not only that transition, but how you can make it so that your intentions and what you want to happen after that can go much smoother. Okay, so first, the tale of St. Jared the Black. Okay, so Jared was a very good friend of mine back in the day, back in my more partying days, honestly, but even though I had died once as a very small child, I've always had a lot of questions about death. And even though I think that I know what happens according to my own memories and my own experiences, as well as conversations with the Horde and a lot of different evidence that I have seen working with ghosts and necromancy, I do think that I know what happens after we die, and we are going to discuss that. But as they say, anyone who says that they know what happens to you after you die is either lying or trying to sell you something. And while I am trying to sell you a book, I do want to acknowledge that no one knows for sure what happens after we die. There are people out there that are just as convinced as I am that what they think is going to happen is true. And that's, at least in my theory, exactly what is going to happen to them, exactly what they think. But we'll get to all of that. First, let's start with St. Jared. Okay, so, as I said, Jared was a good friend of mine back in the partying days. Of course, I mentioned trying to sell you a book. There will be a link to a Google Docs copy in the description portion of this post, just like there is at the end of every other video. So you don't have to pay to read the guild essay that came from that question. But you can purchase a copy of The Sorcerer's Shadow on Amazon, and there will be a link in the description post for that as well. Okay, so back to the story. So, Jared was a good friend of mine back in my partying days, and one night, after a very wild party, everyone else had passed out. And the only ones awake were me and Jared, and we were in the hot tub talking about different philosophical questions, as one will do at the end of a long night of drinking wine and such things. And we actually came to a cliche kind of agreement that if one of us died before the other, we would come back and tell the other what the afterlife was like. And I didn't think much of it at the time. We just went about the next day, we just went about our business the next day, didn't really talk about it, until just a few years later, Jared died. And it was actually a pretty intense and sad experience. He had just gone about improving his life. He had just graduated from a tech school and was trying to get himself into good health, but he pushed himself too far too fast and had a heart attack. But anyways, that is not the important part of St. Jared's story. Because after he dies, a mutual friend of ours, whom I would assume Jared had never told his story to, because I never talked to him about it to anybody, and Jared never brought it up again. But a few days after Jared dies, a mutual friend of ours calls me, and he says, "Hey, I need to talk to you. It's about Jared." And I was like, "Okay." And he tells me that he had a dream that Jared came back from the dead to tell him that he had to tell me that there was no afterlife. Now, I started laughing immediately. I thought this was the funniest thing that Jared had ever done. How can he come back from the dead to tell us that there is no afterlife. At first, I saw a lot of humor in this. My friend, our mutual friend, as far as I know, to this day, is an atheist and does not believe there is any kind of soul or spirit because a ghost told him there is no afterlife. He does not seem to see the problem with that. He who came back from the dead to tell us that there is no afterlife. But I thought about this more. And at first it was funny. But, as Robert Anton Wilson says, it's not true unless it makes you laugh. And like Trey J, the trifold demigod of hedgehog demigod of destruction to the third power replied, "Ah yes, but you don't understand it until it makes you cry." But anyways, there is a truth in that, because there is no after life. Life continues in some form no matter what. According to the Horde, that is the one thing that is impossible, is to completely cease existing. There is a level where you can get to where all you do is perceive. But escaping samsara, as they say. But even then, you are something. Once you have become, once you begin being, there is no end, according to the Horde. But that is, we'll get to a bit more of that in the meantime. The next thing we're going to talk about, now this story I have told before. This is the story of the time that I died as a child. But it is an important part of the story and a good segue into what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so when I was 8 years old, I had a double hernia operation for which they were going to give me anesthesia. Now, I was a very serious child, and I took what I was told very, very seriously. So during this operation, they went through and they actually told me about all the things that they were going to do to me during the surgery and let me know about everything that was going to happen. And they told me it was very important that I keep the mask on during the surgery. And so, being a very serious child and taking these instructions seriously, I propped my elbow up on the side of the bed so that my hand would not fall away after I passed out. And apparently, they assumed my hand was going to fall away because they didn't notice it had fallen away until they'd OD'd me on anesthesia and I flatlined. Now, my recollection of this occurrence is simply going under. And as I went under, I saw everyone spinning around, almost as like when you're drinking and the room starts spinning. It was kind of like that, but it was only one time, like a big spiral vortex, and then I was asleep. And I was asleep for a while. And then suddenly, I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was in the undefined. I was in that liminal space in between. And somehow I instinctually knew where I was. And I thought to myself, okay, you can't think of anything. Anything you think of is going to happen. You need your mom. And I pulled back. And apparently my mom actually sensed that and tried to storm the operating room at that time. She didn't succeed. But I came back into life rather than going into whatever I imagined. Now, a lot of people see a light. A lot of people have near-death experiences, talk about many different things. But these are all things I think that they expected to see, what their mind had programmed them to be ready for. Because I have achieved getting back to that space, that spot where I was in the undefined. And that is actually where the S1 sigil comes in. Because that is how I kept returning to that space to prepare for my own afterlife, and is actually where I originally met the Horde. But we have lots of videos on that. The important part of the S1 sigil for this is that it is a defined point on the other side of the veil, where we can go to prepare a space for our own afterlives. Now, you don't have to use the S1 sigil, but focusing on the S1 sigil is a way to get to that space and get familiar with the process of crossing over. Now, if you haven't seen the S1 sigil, maybe you're new to the channel, this is what it looks like. We talked about its counterpoint, the is, just the other day. This is the static reference point. That is the counterpoint to the is. It is an S with a 1, but it is also several runes. Like I said, I have many episodes featuring the S1. I will leave a link to one of those up here, the main one on the S1. But through that, we can cross over. However, any time that we are dreaming, we can prepare our dream space. Because like I say in the beginning of this series, we are always present in all three realms: the material plane, the mental plane, and the astral realm. It is simply when we die that our primary focus is turned to the astral plane, and we are no longer as focused on the material plane because we don't have a form here anymore until we create a new one if you choose to reincarnate. Okay, so that brings us to our next bit. What are the possible intentions for your afterlife, or what you're going to do after the moment of death? We'll get into a little bit more about preparing for that moment beyond just the sigil, but I want to talk about what your intentions could be, because this is an important part. Okay, so some people, when they die, would like to completely remove themselves from this world, seek the exit to samsara, completely remove themselves, or go to another reality. Some people would like to achieve that nirvana, that state of one with everything, the observer, as the Horde would call it. And then there are those that wish to reincarnate, as well as those who, well, like in my case, want to become a ghost after they die. And we'll get a lot more into the becoming a ghost in a later essay in the volume, because I cover that pretty heavily. But we'll get to that one specifically later. Well, we'll cover it some now, and then finish up with it later. Anyways, so the first one, if you were wanting to disembark from the material plane, the most important thing to do while you're alive is to cut any links that you have. This is one of them things where the Buddhist idea of letting go of desire, letting go of any connections to this place come in, so that when you die, you are fully ready to release, you are fully ready to go. And then you simply can go up through the crossroads or up to the S1 sigil. And then from there, if you have any remaining connections, you can find ways to sever them from there and then actually cross from this reality into the next. And the next reality, what I mean by that is, this is not the only material plane. This is not the only reality. We live in a multiverse. So it is possible at the end of this life, if you have cut all the connections and are ready to go, that you can transfer from this world, this reality, into another. And that is how we prepare for that. And that is similar to how we would prepare for, well, the Buddhist idea of achieving nirvana. That whole losing attainment, that whole losing desire, the cutting all attainments, and simply learning to let go. Now, I realize there's a lot more to it than that. I'm not trying to say that I know everything there is about Buddhism's achieving nirvana. Okay, but that is how we can get to that state of becoming the observer, which, as I understand it, is the same place. And for that, you want to learn to release all cares, all attachments. You don't have to lose interest if you want to remain just the observer, but you have to learn to release the desire to control. You must become a lens through which reality passes. And that is the closest one can get to unbeing as well. That is a completely passive state where only perception exists. And this, when you die, we don't even need to go up to the sigil. It's simply release. Yeah? And then if you were wishing to reincarnate, This one, it is very important that you keep a personal sigil, and that when you go up to the S1 or however you were crossing over, that you constantly repeat the sigil and ingrain it not only into your memory, but into the astral awareness of yourself, so that you can carry that personal sigil from one life into the next. And that is the key. That is the static reference point of your individuality, is remembering that sigil from one life into the next. If you can attach your magical name to that sigil, like how my sigil actually has my magical name in it, a lot of this personal sigils do. That's why when I discuss the personal sigils, I say to make it from your magical name, is because that helps with that. That helps keep that core identity to it. A reference point, a name contains memories, and that makes it easier to remain cohesive in your astral form from one life to the next. And the personal sigil as well is important if you are becoming a ghost. But like I said, I devote an entire essay to that, on becoming a ghost and how to survive death. So we're not going to get too heavy into that one in this particular episode. Okay, so things that you can do while alive. We've discussed a bit on how to do that for the first two, but say that you are wanting to create an astral realm to exist in between lives, or wanting to reincarnate. This is one where we want to prepare the astral, and we do this. We can do this through the S1 sigil by going up there and simply creating our own astral realm in undefined space. Or you can, if you already have somewhere that you dream about repeatedly, you may already have a dream platform or astral area that you already go to. The key is to go there and interact with it as much as possible, to get as familiar with it as you can, familiarize yourself with it, so that when you die, you will know what is going on over there. You will know how to behave and how to interact with things. You'll know how it works. And in this one, again, the personal sigil. You want to use the S1 or whatever means you're using to get into the undefined, and then use your personal sigil as the anchor point for your astral realm, and that will provide you the anchor point, even if you are going to try and stay there in that astral realm for as long as you can before getting reincarnated. There is a bit of a cycle there, yeah? If you just go and create an astral realm, especially if it's not attached to anything that's helping hold you there, like a godhead or a larger community of souls or something like that, eventually you're going to get reincarnated. If you're attached to a godhead, I actually don't recommend that either. I don't recommend being part of some other being's afterlife. That's on you. There are lots of people who want to go to heaven, that sort of thing. Lots of people believe that, and they go where they believe they are going. That according to the way I understand things, but that seems like an odd choice to me. So I guess I'm kind of trying to discourage you from doing that, but to each their own. Anyways, you can attach to the S1 sigil and keep there for as long as you can, and even find other ways to complete that cycle, to keep yourself up on the astral realm rather than having to reincarnate on the material realm. If you can find ways to manifest on the material realm from time to time. In other words, if you have people summoning you down occasionally or some other means like that, but that gets us back into the idea of becoming a ghost, essentially. Anyways, another thing about reincarnating, if you were preparing if you're preparing yourself for reincarnation, is to find places and leave your personal sigil and other marks. Leave bits of yourself sewn to the material realm that make it easier for you to pass through cohesively. Yeah? Okay, so the essay. As I said, the question, well, it was specifically worded as, what are your intentions for your afterlife? And what steps have you done to achieve those goals? Contributors are myself as Sorcerer Tal, Michael O'Sullivan. Like I said, I say simply that I plan to survive death and remain attached to the guild. That will be the thing that I am connected to to keep me from being forced into the reincarnation cycle. There's Michael O'Sullivan, Marnell Killaire, Bob Banks. There's some interesting bits there about not going into the light, and Michael O'Sullivan commented that a pro tip is to realize that you are the light. We also have Yvonne Undine, Gypsy Rose Page, Michael Williams, who we quoted for quite a bit. It's actually a very interesting section there. Penny Bradley, Ryan Peters, Jason John Coldicott. Now, if I pronounce anyone's names wrong, I apologize, but I'm not always that great at that. Marvin Scott Edmonds, Lindsay Luft, Kyle Scott Maternick, D. Lux Sleepwalker, Danielle Darkradistar, Matt Edmonds, Vivian Fay, Brad Berg, Nirvana Nir Ranu, Kit Aratea, Eric Thomas, Sharon Hill, Z. Ada Gokman, Nick Bell, Aaron Nightgaunt, Chris Coran, Signa Allender, Jennifer Lopez Gomez, Glenn Still, Lola Jones, and Joshua Kimball. Okay, I would like to thank all of you for participating in the group essay. Like I said, there will be a link to a Google Docs copy of all of their answers in the description portion of the post. Next video is going to be on naturally occurring hauntings. That is one that I am likely to divide into sections because there's quite a bit to go through there. We'll probably divide it up into the different types of ghosts that can occur naturally and do an episode on each one. I hope to get to the next stuff with the AWA and the Dream Door very soon. Hopefully this Wednesday. No promise on that, but the next bit on that is going to be meeting your mentor, and I hope to have that out this Wednesday. Anyways, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.